This city's 7th murder victim this year was killed by her husband, who is still at large. Melina Gonzalez Nayera found dead in her basement Thursday.
A co-worker at the hair salon commented that Ballantyne avoided questions around her boyfriend's behavior and often turned up late or not at all for work. Tom Maddington has been charged with Ballantyne's murder and will appear in court
A Windsor
May 19th.
doctor has been charged with first-degree murder after a nurse was stabbed to death in a hospital recovery room, police announced today. The doctor, who worked at the same hospital and was known to have had a relationship with the victim.
Investigators believe he used his father-in-law's handgun to shoot his wife and their son on the morning of January 20th.
Even though she never bore marks or bruises, neighbors had witnessed firsthand her husband's mood swings.
The victim's sister said he wasn't physically abusive, which is why her murder comes as a complete shock.
Police have confirmed that 2 charred bodies found in a burned-out car near Dorchester Thursday are those of Sandra Schott of Ingersoll and her husband, Edward. Toxicology results confirmed the initial police assessment that this was a murder-suicide. Edward had been depressed for some time and had previously threatened to kill his wife. The couple leave behind 3 children, Nicholas 2,
Sandra
Alyssa
Schott
4.
worked as a personal support worker at Woodingford Lodge in Ingersoll and had been living in fear of her husband. Her best friend, Deb Ashby, spoke out at the funeral service saying, "I'm so sorry I could not keep Ed from hurting you. I know you were afraid."
He always was telling people this great marriage and these great kids and they're beautiful, and 90% of the time he didn't see his kids. He didn't care anything about the kids most of the time. His idea was bedtime was the best time to have his kids. He could, make everything look so good, and then Sandra would come up an hour later and be crying because he was just so verbally abusive she didn't know what to do.
A lot of times they do look good on the outside. The neighbors are conned, or they're like a false sense of security. They would rather believe that nothing is happening when in fact it is. So I think some of the indicators that are in the package are helpful to say, if you're seeing things like this, it puts more pressure on people to really think about what they're seeing and more responsibility to do something when they notice something that makes them not feel right.
I always hear about, well, he's a really good father and he's a really good provider, and that tends to shadow people's perhaps the reality that's going on in that home, that they could be, it really does shadow it, because that's the common thing that we'll hear. We'll hear that from anyone that interacts. Well, he's the custodian at school, and I know he's a really nice guy because I see him every day, and his kids have lunch every day. So getting past that barrier of that really, nice guy.
Ed could look really good for weeks at a time. He was the perfect husband, the perfect father, and he worked all day, and he'd come home and cook dinner, and on the weekends when she worked midnights, he'd clean the house and keep the kids and let her sleep all day, and then, but you had to be there at night when he had done it all day, and now he's mad because he had to waste his whole day taking care of his family and started yelling.
Someday he would charm the pants off you, and other days it sort of got to the point where I'd say, okay, is Ed going to be around? Because I'll come over and visit you, but is Ed going to be around? What kind of mood's he in? And she'd say, oh, no, he's off doing whatever, and I'd go over and see her. But yeah, he had definitely, I don't know if it'd be different personalities or quite what, but could be very charming, and could be, you'd look at him and you'd go, wow, that's a cruel fella.
We can point to almost every case and find that somebody knew something, but they didn't understand the significance of it, and they didn't understand what to do about it once they did appreciate that there is a risk for violence.
I think what's very surprising is when you talk to the average person on the street about the issue of domestic violence or domestic homicide, they always think about what's the role of the police, what could the police have done differently, or do we need more shelters for abused women, more support services. One of the realities is that although we always need more services, that most of the cases that we've seen, most of the tragedies, the key people are right there beside the victim. They're friends, family, co-workers, neighbors, who often, as Al says, have a lot of information.
I was always the one that would go over to her place. I simply thought it was because it was hard for her. She had 3 kids, so it's hard for her to get a babysitter, to go out for coffee or whatever. But then the more I got to know her, I sort of noticed that it was more Ed not allowing her to leave the house. Just things like that. He just seemed controlling that way.
Right from the second he quit his job, I said to the family, he quit his job because he can't keep tabs on her. And he can't, calling and her not answering, he can't drive to find out if she's there or not. So with him quitting his job, then we saw the van around the area a lot more.
We found that in the majority of the cases that there were in excess of 10 risk factors, most of which could have been known by family or friends or co-workers, that had they understood what those factors meant or what those incidents meant, then they might have been able to, one, inform the person who became the victim of the violence, or in fact the perpetrator of the violence, to try to have intervened and deflected, as Peter has said, even taking the step of calling the police.
There is a sheet, and there's like 19 signs, and Ed qualified for 18 and 19. If I had that sheet before she was killed, guarantee you that she wouldn't have been in her house. She would have been next door at her mother's safe, or at my house, or we wouldn't even left her alone in the house. If we knew he qualified for 18 and 19 things for domestic abuse, violence, and murder, no, she'd be here.
Some days I sort of felt like the mom, and you want to go in and say, okay, pack your bags, we're going. But then, you know, I'd look at her and she'd say, oh no, everything's okay, I can smooth this over, everything's gonna be good, I want to stay in my house, you know, I don't want to disrupt my kids. So then you'd back off a little bit too. But you'd still in the back of your mind, you're still thinking, okay, you know, I should be doing something else, but I don't know what. I don't know how to convince her to try to get some help.
So I like the public engagement component of the program, in the sense that it says, well, you know, an institution, women's shelters, can deal with the issue, but not to the extent, to the magnitude of the problem. So that's when citizens come and play a role, because I think if it is a societal issue, I think that the society also, we have a role to play in that.
Because I think it is when community members step forth and really make choice to end violence against our women, that that is contributing to an overall healing of the whole community, because we know that it's just not isolated. That's what this whole campaign is about. It's not just in the house of the man who's beating up the woman. Especially in the smaller communities, it affects all members.
Unless we figure out how to engage everybody in this, it'll become more and more difficult for us to end woman abuse.
And that's how I see its importance. Is we end up getting called sometimes at the last minute after an assault happened, or sometimes even the homicide. And going back and interviewing people, you find out that everybody knows a little bit about the history of the family. And for us, it would be much better to hear about it earlier and be able to do some safety planning that we do. If we're aware of the situation, we can do safety planning at the home and at the workplace even, where a lot of the homicides do take place.
We need family members, we need neighbors, we need friends to get on board to assist us in trying to keep people safe, people of domestic violence victims. If we don't encourage them to contact and to report what's going on to community partners, stakeholders, and to the police, then we're leaving that person in a high-risk situation, which ultimately leads to death.
He had said to her that he would kill her. And I said to her, okay, this is enough, we've got to do something. And it was the Monday before she was murdered. And I said to her on the Monday, I had her on the phone, and I just said to her, Sandra, this is it, we got to do something, because I don't want to be going to your funeral. I said, you're my best friend, and I don't want to go there.
I'd never thought that he'd kill her. I thought he'd kill himself. But obviously decided that the only way to take himself out was to take her first. And then he didn't have a choice. That's where it ended.
Many people who know lots of information and I think basically don't know what to do with the information that they have. They don't know how to access the kinds of supports that they might need, even holding that information for themselves, and how would they be able to do that. And I think the last thing that we want to end up with here is yet again, another tragedy where people are coming and saying, as you read in the paper headlines, newspapers, and here on the television, you know, we knew what he was about, we knew what was happening with her, and inadvertently, you know, potentially not have done something that could have prevented yet again another death.
But a lot of times, our neighbors and friends and families do not want to get involved. And they think they're doing it to protect the victim. In essence, they're not. They're putting the victim at higher risk.
The community can be a lot of different things, and that people who live within community with each other can be a very strong support network for each other. And I think often what people don't recognize is how supportive they can be, or the kinds of things that they can help out with or provide. And sometimes it's as simple as witness to what the woman's experience is and support her in that experience. So it doesn't always have to be I'm getting on the phone to call 911. Sometimes it can just be I see what you're going through. I recognize what you're going through, and I'm here to support you.
If there was enough knowledge in even in just pamphlets, that a neighbor could grab that pamphlet and put it in somebody's mailbox when you know she's going to get the mail, or put it in her car windshield wiper when you know that she's going to be getting in the car without him. Things like that, when something shows up out of nowhere, people think. So if you can say to somebody without speaking to them, I'm worried about you here, read this. Being the person getting it, I'd sit down and go, wow, somebody thinks that there's signs of this. Maybe I should sit back and take a look.
I would say if you suspect that a friend, a relative, a coworker, whatever, is being abused, if you suspect it, ask the questions. Don't just turn your head. Don't just assume it's not going on, even if they say not. Keep your eyes and ears open and do whatever you can.
What's our number one wish? I think number one wish would be to change public attitudes, to make sure that everybody, whether they're a friend, neighbor, or a family doctor, looks at this issue differently. We want to create a kind of society where everyone takes violence that happens in relationships seriously and responds. If you think about how far we've come on other issues, you know, for example, drinking and driving, it's a much simpler issue at some levels, but everybody knows if they're at a party and someone's drinking too much and they want to leave the party, there's not a man I know who won't try to wrestle away keys or confront the issue in a way to prevent a potential tragedy. I guess I'd like to have that same vision for the future, that there'll be time in the province of Ontario when somebody sees abuse, when somebody sees a warning sign, they won't be frightened to do something.
It's just unbelievable what happened. It's from the time I got the call in the morning from the police till the time I found out about her death that afternoon, it's just an unbelievable day. You don't think that something like that could happen in a town of a population of 11,000 people, but it does.
When you're not sure if it's a sign, it's a sign. And take it as a sign and protect yourself and your children. That's it.